because I was explaining what PMT/PMS was like to one of my male friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, my God, that sounds awful. I said, has your girlfriend ever tried explaining it? And they went, yeah. And it took someone who you perceived of as a male for you to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the look on his face, he was white as he suddenly went, oh, right. Is this that internalized misogyny thing that I keep hearing about?
Mm-hmm.
Could be.
Ding, ding. Welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just could be.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. If you like what we do and want to make a contribution, you can become a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. Now, join us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I am a cis queer woman, and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I have a conversation with Zelda, a performer and magician. Zelda is happy for people to use the pronouns they feel are appropriate. She is intersex and disabled and refers to herself as trans adjacent. Find out what that means to Zelda in this episode. We also talk about using fun versus boring as decision-making criteria as opposed to male versus female, having a gender identity as fluid as a body identity, knowing the science versus living the science, giving hope by being yourself, being a bridge between dualities, lucky genetic quirks, and being a special case. It was recorded on the 16th of November 2021. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
My name is Zelda.
Hello, Zelda. And what I normally ask is tell me about your gender experience, but let's start with pronouns. What pronouns do you use?
Well, when I work as a magician, I often say pick a card, any card. And in my case, I will say pick a pronoun, any pronoun.
Uh-huh.
Use the pronouns you feel more appropriate for me. There is no judgment or no decision made on your motives when you choose them. But I like people, in my case, to use the pronouns they want to use. But I always stress I'm a special case.
Mm-hmm.
And normally you use the pronouns other people want.
Yeah. So, special case. Let's talk about that a little bit because over to you.
I've been a special case all my life. And bearing in mind, I am, at time of recording, the ripe old age of 45. The word special during my lifetime has had many meanings, and almost all of them have applied to me. From special, as in gifted, and special, as in being sent to a special educational institute for children who are having trouble thinking.
Right.
I have done the spectrum of special.
Right.
As well as the spectrum of other things as well.
Yeah.
And so when I was born, I was disabled, but not in your classic wheelchair using disabled.
Right.
Now, in these more lightened times, disabled, we are aware there's a very big term, and we have hidden disabilities, and people are now more and more aware that some people will use sticks one day, wheelchairs the next, and maybe even take steps for the neither the day after. But back in the 80s, you were disabled or you weren't disabled, which meant you were blind or a wheelchair user or cognitively struggling. I was none of those things. I could use my legs just after a lot of surgery, and I've had a lot of surgery.
Right.
So I was always kind of partially disabled. Although these days we would just say disabled. And then due to the speech impediment and the fact that I had a limp, I was obviously mentally impaired in the viewpoint of my teachers, and so they wanted to send me off to special school. So I've been, and they soon realized that after they got me able to speak properly, I was actually more intellectually gifted, and so I was sent to other special classes for gifted children within a year of being threatened with special school for kids who can't think. So I've done a lot of special.
Yeah.
It's a very loaded word for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so like talking about gender experiences,
Hmm.
it's only part of the story because it's more about sex experiences for you. So
Yes.
yeah.
How I mean, they do go in my case hand in hand, but
Hmm.
I was raised male-ish.
Right.
I didn't look like normal boys, but I didn't look like normal humans.
Right.
So that was hardly surprising.
Hmm.
I looked like mum had an affair with a squid. I had
Oh,
heart damage, kidney damage, spina bifida, two forms of clubfoot on the same foot. That was then on backwards.
wow.
So there was a lot going on.
Hmm.
And so what was between my legs was kind of low down on the priority list
Right.
and kept on getting shoved to the back burner.
Hmm.
So I was raised as a boy.
Hmm.
It was always strange though, because I don't know if it was because being disabled, they indulged me and just let me do what I wanted. But if I didn't fit a stereotypical boy thing, no one cared.
Hmm.
So I wanted to play the recorder. Only girls played the recorder in my school. But my
Hmm.
parents were in, had a chat, and girls and me played the recorder. The same with needlework. But I was
Hmm.
also an accomplished arc welder. So no activity was male or female, it was fun or boring.
That's a much better way to discern,
Hmm.
activities, if you ask me, for sure. Yeah.
And I mean, as I was from age 5 onwards, I think I was a complete science fiction nerd. My school at first gave up trying to teach me to read. And so my big brother taught me to read using Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and some comics. And I think that just made me a complete nerd. But also, because I kept going to hospitals all the time, I started to suspect that actually I might be bionic.
Right.
Maybe I wasn't such a gifted child after all. Maybe I was stupid. Um,
You're a superhero.
yes, basically. And I did see it as being a superhero
Yeah.
because using walking sticks meant that I was the strongest kid in my school, even when I was one of the youngest.
Mm.
The fact that I was walking in intense pain all the time meant other kids couldn't hurt me.
Mm.
So, whilst I wasn't an aggressive child, I think when I was in the second year of infant, one of the junior school kids decided to try and beat me up. So, this child was like twice my age.
Mm.
And I threw him to the ground with one arm,
Right.
got him into a full body lock. He was screaming for mercy, and they sent social services round to my house because they wanted to know how I could do that,
Mm.
and not the house of the kid who wanted to beat up a small child. So
Mm.
that's more of a, I know we're getting a bit off track from sex and gender, but I'm just trying to explain the disability angle
Yeah.
meant I never felt normal. I
Mm-hmm.
never cared for being normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I never felt like a boy, but
Mm.
I never felt like a human. I was
Mm.
like, there's so many things different about me. Why are we trying to pigeonhole me even more? And then when I went off to school, big school, that's when things became a little bit more obvious. At this point, I was more aware that I didn't look like other boys. And then I had to have a test where they put a catheter in to inject it with a radioactive isotope, which did not give me superpowers, and I'm still upset about that. But it did show my kidneys up on the scanner.
Mm.
And I'm lying there, and the nurses looked at me, walked away, came back 5 minutes with the doctor, who looked at me, walked away. And about an hour later, they've worked out how to put a catheter in me. And at this point, I'm thinking, I think I'm non standard at this point.
Mm.
We've gone beyond, I'm a little bit different, and I'm actually confusing people.
Mm.
Hmm. And so that's
Wow.
then when I really started to think something's up. And the nurses told my parents, we think puberty will take care of things. And spoiler alert, puberty got very interesting very fast.
Right.
So the next year, I suddenly had two rather large breasts pop out.
Mm.
And I'd seen the book on puberty in school, and I was wondering if somebody turned over two pages at the same time in my case, because
Mm.
it didn't seem to quite fit.
Yeah.
Now, you have to bear in mind, if this happened to someone now, they'd be on Google and they'd have ideas very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst there was an internet, there wasn't a World Wide Web, and there certainly wasn't a Google. And so I hit the books. And I thought this is either breast cancer or Klinefelter's.
Mm.
And as you're probably aware, 2% of breast cancers in the world roughly are in cis men.
Mm.
In the part of the country I was, it was actually 5%.
Interesting.
And so I'm like, that's interesting. It could be that.
Mm.
I went to the doctors who pointed out it was the same size on both sides.
Yeah.
And I had a giant ass. And so she was like, I think it's the Klinefelters there, to be honest. I think that's what we...
Yeah.
And then she just said, but you've got the scar on your lung. That's going to kill you. Can we fix that? And we'll come back to the Klinefelters after.
Mm.
And then I went off to university. All this time, I kept this away from my parents because there was a lot going on in their lives at that moment, and they didn't need more things to worry about with me.
Mm.
I knew it wasn't going to hurt me. I knew the worst case, it would affect my fertility. But I'd been told by doctors that having kids was a dumb idea anyway, with all the things wrong with me. So I didn't worry about it. And I went off to university. And doing a science degree, I had biologist friends who go, you've got Klinefelters, can I have a look? And so I was met with interest as opposed to horror.
Mm.
And it was literally the case of, well, pop a dress on, we're having a girls' night out, off we go.
Right.
And so from that point onwards, I thought, well, why would I give this up? I can do what I want. I can be who I want.
Mm.
Why should I limit myself? And so that was really the start of me really exploring it, was when I was 18 and left home, because I didn't have to worry about anyone else's feelings on the matter.
Yeah.
You could argue that you shouldn't have to worry about other people's feelings anyway, but I did.
Mm.
So I took that choice.
Yeah.
However, whilst I was then open with my friends and, my partners, obviously, they somehow pieced it together. Can't imagine how. It was later on in life that it really took off and really explored it, and it really became something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So, I suppose that's just the grounding on not fitting in and not being normal, regardless of sex and gender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From that point onwards, I just lived my life, again, things not being male or female, being fun or boring.
Yeah.
And then I started working as a performer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing magic at a small horror event. And they were, as far as they were concerned, I was a guy. I presented male.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back the next year, they said, look, we've seen you limping and it breaks our hearts. So we're going to put you in a fortune teller's tent and you do magic as a mad fortune teller sitting down. And I thought, oh, that's nice. They went, now we've done you a favor. Could you do us a favor? Would you mind doing it as a bearded woman?
Right.
They had no idea that I was intersex. They had no idea I had Klinefelters.
Mm-hmm.
I was binding at that point, so they couldn't see anything. And I just looked at them, burst out into laughter. My friend doubled over laughing, and we just went, I think I can accommodate you.
Wow.
And so the next week, I just rocked. I borrowed my wife's belly dancing outfit. I got an underbust corset just to really take the mick and wore that in, and that was the start of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this poster, Madam Zelda, unavailable due to unforeseen circumstances. And no one ever got the joke. And they looked at me, looked at the poster, crossed off unavailable, and that was the start.
Wow. Yeah.
And even though all my friends knew, and many had seen me dressed as a girl, some hadn't. Some hadn't seen me in a low-cut top.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was quite interesting when people started to see me, who had known me for a few years, when they started seeing the goods, as it were, and seeing what my body actually looked like, what I've been hiding for years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was interesting.
Mm.
That really was. I suppose I should explain what intersex form I have.
Yeah. So you mentioned Klinefelters, which is like an intersex variety, right?
Yeah, now, this is one of those things where if you go online and you start a discussion, you're going to find an argument very fast, because some people will say intersex is only androgen insensitivity disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Other people say intersex is only this or only that. So my concept of whether or not this is a form of intersex comes from a friend of mine with a PhD in biology who specializes in sexual development.
Right.
So take it up with a higher
Valid.
power if you don't
Yeah.
agree.
Good enough, right?
Yeah. So I'm afraid it might not reach the giddy heights of a post I saw on Facebook once,
Yeah.
or a meme with a minion on it, but it's the best I've got. So
Yeah.
in my case, people born with male bodies have an X and a Y chromosome. People born with female bodies have two X chromosomes, and I've got an X, a Y, and then another X.
Mm.
Most people with Klinefelters look male.
Mm-hmm.
They may have a slightly chubby chest. They may have longer arms and legs like a woman. There are pictures on YouTube where they show like pubic hair pattern, female, body hair, female, that sort of thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I've either got the most extreme form of it ever known, or there's another form of intersex in there as well. My doctors aren't quite sure, but Klinefelters is the one they've nailed down as saying you've definitely got that.
Right.
So that's the one on my medical record.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the benefit of those who can't see, the way I would describe my body is the way somebody would draw intersex if they just heard it and didn't know what it was,
Mm-hmm.
which is a beard, long hair, and a rather substantial bosom.
Yeah.
But most people with intersex variations don't look like me, and I always make that point. I always say I am again special, as I always am. I'm the exception. So if somebody says they're intersex and yet they look male, they look female, don't think that they're not, for heaven's sakes.
Mm.
There are many forms of intersex where you can look like you fit the binary,
Yeah.
whether you do or don't.
True.
And then some people with intersex feel like they mentally fit a binary.
Right.
Sometimes the binary that their bodies resemble, and sometimes the binary their bodies don't resemble.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm kind of special. My gender identity is as fluid as my body identity.
Yeah, so you mentioned the term transadjacent, which I thought was really interesting.
It's because I've had some experiences relatable to trans women.
Mm-hmm.
I will never try to take that title because I've not done the hard work. I've not had to worry about my social life, my love life, my career, whether or not I should take this medication to change my body or not, or have surgery. I just shaved my legs and got a better fitting bra. Job done. Transitioned. And whilst it sounds a bit soppy, one of my best friends said you transitioned to yourself. Because what you've done is you've stopped hiding.
Right.
And I thought, I like that. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But intersex people are often lumped into that whole weird, blurry category of sex and gender differences with non-binary, trans, and the rest of it. We kind of get all lumped in an amorphous blob by the public.
Yeah.
And then the other thing in my case is the rather hysterical fact that I got cancer. Normally, that's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm special.
Right.
And the fact that I got cancer was hysterical.
Do tell.
So, at the ripe old age of 38, I got cancer in what we will call my prostate.
Right.
It's the wrong size, the wrong shape, in the wrong place, does a slightly different job.
Okay.
Not all of us are lucky enough to have names for our organs.
Mm.
And the medication they put me on is, the old way of dealing with it was to just turn off testosterone. Mm-hmm. They didn't do that with me per se. Now, because of the other bodily abnormalities, because of the spine bifida and other things, through a roundabout mechanism, it was destroying my kidneys and killing me.
Oh.
And so we're going to give you this medication. It will lower your testosterone just a little bit. And I was like, right. Most guys won't even notice the difference. I'm like, right. You do remember I'm not most guys, right? And my doctor just went, I know, this is why it's going to be really interesting.
Let's just experiment on you. Yeah.
And so this was before I was performing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is back when I was presenting male almost all the time. Again, all my friends knew I was intersex. I would occasionally pop a dress on, have a night out with the girls, but overall I was bloke.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that testosterone gave you muscles, which burnt off calories. So my calorie intake would drop, and I was overweight, and I wanted to lose weight. So I thought, I'm going to have to diet really fast.
Mm.
I went from a 38E to a 36G.
Wow.
So I lost weight, but I got curvier.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that was when, and that then, not long after that was when I then started presenting as Zelda and working as Zelda.
Hmm.
And that's when some other strange stuff happened.
Right.
Again, messing around with my gender identity, because my tent fell over. Now, this doesn't sound like much, I know, but bear with me.
Okay.
Because I've been using walking sticks all my life, as previously mentioned, I was hench. I could lift anyone or anything. My back would be ruined the next day, but I could lift anything.
Hmm.
And I couldn't lift the tent. And the year before, I could carry that on one arm.
Hmm.
So I went to the girl that sells the tea and I went, I can't lift my tent up. And she said, well, don't worry, we'll get the men to do it. And I'm like, screw you, I'm the men, aren't I? Am I? And I was in a bit of a daze. I walked into the big top and the acrobats there, some of them had known me for like 20 years.
Uh-huh.
So they knew me when I was always presenting male. And I was like, the girl with the tea thinks that I'm a girl. And they're like, well, yeah, name the male things about you. And don't lie, we get changed with you, so we know. So,
Right.
my voice, my beard. Ah, that's it, isn't it? Oh, bollocks. And it's something which has gotten, even though I do light weights to try and keep my body in tone, my arms are just so much skinnier than they used to be.
Mm.
And that is weird for me. That is weirdly harder for me to accept than having big boobs and a big bum.
Mm.
Because it was the first time through all of this journey I'd lost something.
Mm.
And that hit my sense of self much more than anything else.
Interesting. Yeah.
But then, in some ways as well, that's one of the things that angers me a little bit. You see, one of the things I've said to people is, you worry about trans women in sport? Well, this little example, and is why I say trans adjacent, because I have been medically changed a little,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Not that you have to be medically altered to be trans, but you know where I'm coming from. My body has altered, and my life has altered as a result.
Yeah.
So it's proof that you stop someone's testosterone, any advantage they had muscle-wise disappears after a year.
Mm.
So we really don't need to worry about trans women in sport.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other thing is, when I talk about that and talking about the fact that I felt vulnerable for the first time, then I found out a senator or governor in America was saying when a trans woman talks about being vulnerable and scared, it's part of their fetish.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa.
Mm.
So, because it's all talking about the fact that, what bathroom should trans women use? Well, are they safe in the men's? No.
Mm.
And yet they're going, well, that's them talking about that. That's just them indulging in their fetish about weakness. And it's all this weird BDSM sub-dom stuff I've heard about somewhere. And
Oh, the misogyny. Yeah.
mm-hmm. But this was a woman saying it.
Wow.
And so I suddenly thought, and then I caught myself self-censoring a lot because of it. So when people talk about what bathroom do you use, well, I use the disabled bathroom. But I would, because I'm disabled. That's got nothing to do with me being intersex or how I present. That's just because I need all the equipment in there.
Yeah.
But then when people start talking about my body and the differences in my body between this and a normal person, as it were, somebody who's not intersex, when I start talking about something, they go, you do sound like you're just living some sort of fetishist dream. And I'm like, no, it's my life.
Yeah.
Stop co-opting it and stop attributing things to the words I say that aren't true.
Mm.
And that I find tiring. Constantly having to be careful what I say, because some people are waiting to latch on to a misspoken word, a misused term, and using that as some sort of gotcha, because
Yeah.
they're worried that I'm using my life as a gotcha to defend trans people. Because most people's idea of, most transphobic arguments, which try to claim to use science, kind of fall apart when intersex people are around.
Yeah.
And I had this experience last week on Twitter. A library just said, hey, we've got an LGBTQIA plus section. Librarians have had training. If you need to ask questions, they can help you find the book that'll help you. And somebody just said, why is a complex medical condition like intersex being included in lesbian and gay matters? And that library isn't in charge of what new letters are being added to the alphabet mafia that is the LGBTQIA plus community. We won't stop till we have all the letters.
Yeah.
But that library is not in charge of that. They just saw lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, intersex, trans, non-binary. Let's help these people and get these books all sorted out, and we'll make sure that our librarians have training so they know what the letters mean. So if somebody comes in, they can help. That's wholesome.
Yeah.
But these people had to go, why are you including that? And so I just said, meh, speaking as an intersex person, if I had that in the library when I was 14, I would have been thrilled.
Yeah.
Sorry if that upsets some of the people here. And then I got, somebody had made a graphic of a Uno card, the game Uno.
I'm not familiar.
Uno, or it's a card game where each card's got rules or whatever on it. And it had on it using intersex as an example, as a gotcha example to defend transism, miss a go. So they were shutting down me just saying, I think this is a good idea. And they obviously must use this a lot because they went through the hassle of making a graphic of a playing card to just put up and say, you're intersex, you're defending trans people, we will not talk to you because you don't understand the science. Because, of course, I would never have looked at the science of my own body.
No, why would you, right?
Yeah. Let's not go into the fact of my degree and everything as well. No, we'll ignore all that. But the fact that they obviously must do this a lot because they took the time to make the graphic for it.
I know, right?
I mean,
wow.
that was put there within a minute of me posting. So they didn't do that on the fly. They had that ready and waiting.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But then that just shows what intersex and also trans people are dealing with all the time.
Yeah.
When the fact that you got these people lying in wait like trapdoor spiders.
Yeah.
To pounce with a load of animated GIFs.
Yeah. Wow.
It's annoying and disgusting. And I mean, we're talking about some of the misogynistic arguments I've had against any sense of any claim of femininity on my behalf. So I've been told, well, you sound like a typical bloke because you use the word boobs. Yeah, like my wife and my sister and my cousin and my best friend, who also use the words norks, tits, titties, and various other words. Not only men use those words, it might be a geographical thing, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I know somebody from a small part of Scotland where everyone says norks. So maybe don't be so quick to jump that. Otherwise, you're saying like all the women I know aren't women. And then I had somebody else say, you can't be at all feminine, you like science fiction. And I'm like, all right, so sci-fi is just for boys all of a sudden. Are you going to reinforce that misogynistic trope that women don't belong in sci-fi?
Oh, don't even start. Right.
Let's have a quick look at who invented the sci-fi genre. Oh, that'd be Mary Shelley when she wrote Frankenstein, wasn't it? And who was it that made sure Star Trek was made? Oh, Lucy Ball, the comedian. Yes. And who kept Star Trek alive before the movies came out? Oh, yeah, that was the female-led fan fiction community. So, yeah, don't say women can't like sci-fi.
Oh, totally.
So, their arguments against intersex and trans women are arguments against women.
Totally.
Just women that don't fit their idea of what a woman is.
Yeah.
And they start getting more and more specific just to try and exclude trans people. And the more specific they get on the definition of woman or female, the more women they exclude or the more women they feel they oppress or make them feel awful.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
your hatred is so strong for people you've never met, who mean
Mm-hmm.
you no harm, and whose existence doesn't affect you in the slightest.
Yeah.
You're willing to hurt other women.
Mm.
Maybe it's time to have a look at it again. Just maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what you just talked about is that the whole
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQIA, etc., alphabet. And I know not all intersex people feel like they're part of that community. But it's like, yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from. Like if I were to see a section in the library
Mm-hmm.
that includes like the LGBTQIA,
Mm-hmm.
all
Yeah.
the things, gender, sex, and sexuality, really. I would agree that it's a good idea to include it.
Yeah.
And like people using science or facts, I mean, what is that even? Science evolves all the
Yeah.
time. There's new discoveries made, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, that thing we said 20 years ago? We were
Mm-hmm.
wrong.
Yeah.
Let's just update the paperwork. And everyone's like, oh yeah, yeah, cool, yeah.
Yeah.
But if other people say it who don't have the, qualifications, they're like, no, no, that's not a thing.
I mean, the one thing I often explain to people is I go on a bit of a segue and I talk about the atom for a second.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, I learned an atom's got a positive pit in the middle, that's
Mm-hmm.
positively charged.
Mm-hmm.
Then 2 electrons in a circle, that negatively charged. Then a bigger circle with 8 electrons in, so on
Mm-hmm.
and so forth.
Yeah.
At college, I learned that was wrong. And they're
Right.
not circles, they're donut-shaped or figure-of-8 shaped orbitals. At university, I learned that was wrong. And it's
Mm.
a cloud of possibility of where there might be charge.
Wow.
School doesn't teach you the full story. If it did, there wouldn't be a need for university.
Right.
So when people say, well, no, it's just boy, girl, X, Y, X, X, I learned that at school. Great. Yeah, I learned many things at school that were simplifications.
Mm-hmm.
And go and talk to somebody studying a PhD in biology, and they're going to give you a different story.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And like, no matter how much paperwork, if someone tells you about their experience, that's their experience.
Yeah.
They can't be wrong about their own experience,
It's, no. But I mean, it's important, though, that when we talk about these, that's a very small part of life. And overall, people are lovely. Every person who I meet in the real world tends to be most lovely.
Mm.
So all my friends are fantastic. I mean, the dress
Mm-hmm.
at the moment I've got now is one that my friend Jane gave me because she's too big for it now.
It's a lovely dress.
Thank you. It's literally just got it out today. And I'm not
Nice.
100% sure what I'm going to wear with it yet. I haven't quite worked out the accessories for it.
Yeah.
But she's lovely and she's like my sister. And then when I go out, and I say I always dress smartly.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing that happens is I get children thrust at me for selfies,
Wow.
and I get asked respectfully and nicely if I'm in a show,
Mm-hmm.
and do I do that song "This Is Me,"
Right.
but in a nice way. They're not doing it sarcastically.
Yeah. So people are mostly curious, you find.
Curious,
Mm-hmm.
and they make the assumption that I'm in show business, which I am.
Mm-hmm.
Ergo, I can't really be upset by that.
Yeah.
How dare you be perceptive? Oh. I
Yeah.
often make the point of saying, again, though, I'm a special case. Normally, if you
Mm-hmm.
see a woman with a beard, just leave them be. And I do have friends who are cis women with fantastic facial hair
Right.
that grows much faster than mine. And
Yeah.
it's normal. In 3 of the extreme cases, it's polycystic ovary syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Getting back to the horribleness just for a second, they are now terrified to go to the bathroom in public.
Right. Yeah.
So again, yay, you're just making life awkward for
Yeah. Well done. Yeah.
cis women.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, what was I going to say? So I often explain, look, it's okay to talk to me about it, ask me questions, because it's what I
Mm-hmm.
do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just leave people alone.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I mean,
And
you are a human library book, so that is
Mhm.
obviously an opportunity for people to ask questions.
Yes,
What do you find is the most common question, or what are the most common questions you get asked?
One of them is, would I want to have a normal sexual alignment?
Right. What does that even mean?
As in,
Right.
like, would I like to be just a regular man or woman? Would I be
Right.
okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Or how do I mentally feel?
Mm.
And I mean, the answer to that, I used to think that I thought myself as a guy with a few perks until all my male friends says, you're not a guy. Sorry, but no, you're not. I was like, what?
Not a typical guy, I
And
guess, right?
they're
Yeah.
saying, well, I'd be okay waking up with those to play with for the morning, but I couldn't live with it.
Mm.
And I'm like, good point. I guess my brain matches my body. And it is
Mm.
true. When I first started growing boobs, when I was like 13, 14, my first thought is, am I going mad?
Well, yeah.
Closely followed by, yay?
Oh, brilliant.
So, it's like the fact I didn't hate it and there was no trauma of it. And I was like, okay, fine. Family will freak out if they see these for now, but what am I going to do with this further down the line?
Mm.
So, yeah, mentally, I mustn't fit a standard binary thing. So that's another question. One of the one question that made me think the most, apart from why don't I want to just be a man or a woman,
Mm-hmm.
was will I go through menopause?
Mm.
That literally got me thinking, oh my God, there's a whole new scary thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I do have a hormonal cycle,
Mm.
which my poor wife has to put up with. You know, I was having an absolute screaming, the world hates me, I'm a terrible human being fit last week.
Right.
And she was just literally like, at what point can I point out what date it is at you? Like,
Yeah.
oh, for fuck's sake.
That is such a thing, isn't it? I
Yeah.
remember, I only, well, I mean, I don't get periods anymore. So, but I'm sure there's still a cycle of some description. But
Yeah.
I remember when I was younger, there would be days I would drop my pen and I would sob,
Yeah.
and it's like, what the
Well,
actual, yeah.
I mean, I always had. I'm very good at controlling my emotions because the sheer amount of pain I was in as a kid. I
Mm.
was walking around wired on adrenaline,
Mm.
so I had to control my temper because it was a dangerous temper, even as a
Mm.
child.
Yeah.
But when they did turn off the testosterone, I had a full meltdown at work.
Right.
And funny enough, the girl that gave me this dress, she was my boss.
All right.
And she literally went, sit down there, have some chocolate, have a cup of tea, wait 10 minutes, then go back down.
Yeah.
Don't try and deal with this right now. You're in no state for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, it's come to this. She still talks
Yeah.
about that day with pride.
Oh, I bet. So
So,
you have quite a unique insight
well,
into all
and,
those
and
things.
that was one
Yeah.
of the weird things. Because I was explaining what PMT/PMS was like to one of my male friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, my God, that sounds awful. I said, has your girlfriend ever tried explaining it? And they went, yeah. And it took someone who you perceived of as a male for you to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the look on his face, he was white as he suddenly went, oh, right. Is this that internalized misogyny thing that I keep hearing about?
Mm-hmm.
Could be.
Ding ding. Welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just could be. We all have it, me
Yeah,
included.
totally. Yeah.
Realize it's there, accept it, and do your best to work around the subconscious biases that you have.
Totally. Yeah.
Don't beat yourself up over it. Just stop doing it.
Yeah. Just do better when you know better, right?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
but again, that was one of those moments where it's like, well, this is more of a gift than a curse, if there ever was.
Go on.
Because when I work as a disabled guy, I have people coming up every couple of months and they say, oh, the fact that you're doing this gives my child who's got certain health issues hope. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that felt amazing. Really hit
Yeah.
me in the heart. And every single night as Zelda, I'd have people come up talk about their body weight, body hair, scars, physical issues, emotional issues.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd say, if you can make all of this work with what you've got, maybe I've got to stop holding myself back as well. And
Mm.
every single night, somebody was telling me that I was giving them hope.
Beautiful.
And that's when I went, I can't just do this for 1 month of the year. I've got to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people it's easy for me to be confident, outgoing, and secure because I've got the best support system of anyone on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an amazing wife, fantastic friends.
Yeah.
It's easy for me because of that, and I don't expect other people to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad it's helping people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of a big thing for me is to try and make things easier and better for other people, and to help
Mm-hmm.
them do what they want to do, provided it's not like something horrible.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah.
With that obvious caveat.
Indeed. Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
really lovely. Yeah.
and so I found myself acting more like a bridge between men and women, disabled, non-disabled, trans and cis.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always the special case. I'm disabled, but not wheelchair using. I'm not exactly male or female. I'm not straight nor gay. I'm not trans, but also by definition, I'm really not cis.
Mm.
Because
Yeah, how could you be, right?
yeah, I'm walking around with a vestigial womb, and yet also vestigial testes. So
Mm.
I don't fit into the male or female category there.
Yeah.
You could I was sometimes at late at night, me and my friends, we actually chat like, can somebody who's intersex be cis?
Mm.
And I think we just decided that's a person by person thing.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
And to be honest, I think intersex, when it comes to the LGBTQIA plus world, the I could stand for individual as much as intersex,
Mm.
because there are lots of groups for gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, and yet intersex people rarely come together.
Mm.
And what we often find is people with like a certain condition will reach out to other people with those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll say, oh, we hear that like 2% of people are intersex. This is wrong because that takes into account this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we're intersex, we're individual, we're sometimes isolated.
Mm.
And we don't seem, or at least I haven't found that strong communal bond that I see with my trans, gay, and lesbian and bisexual friends.
Mm.
Maybe that's why I co-opt theirs and join their groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like I use the term cis queer for
Mm,
myself, but I've been questioning gender for a while, and
yeah.
especially since I've been on this podcast journey having conversations with all these people. And I might drop the cis at one point and just go for queer. But
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, like, what does it even mean to be a woman? And it's all so up in the air. And I'm in a local group with like non-binary group,
Mm,
and I feel really at home there,
yeah.
even though I don't necessarily
It,
feel like I'm
it's
non-binary as
it,
such.
it's kind of funny because I didn't feel at one point like I was at all womanly as I was wrestling to get into the giant ass bra. Um, and I still thought my body is male at one point, and it's kind of like
Hmm.
it takes two hands to move each of these damn things. No, it is not a male body. We can be totally oblivious to who we are, and that's a
Yeah.
physical thing. Emotional, mental feelings are even harder to pin down,
Hmm.
and the whole idea of what is a woman, what is a man. You're quite correct. It's the sort of thing my wife will talk about forever.
Hmm.
She has long talks about this with me because
Yeah.
she talks about the fact that there are a lot of trans people, and it's like if they didn't feel the need to fit these stereotypes or these images or
Mm.
these ways of being, would they feel the need to transition? And it's
Yeah,
not as that
that's an
she
interesting
disagrees with
question.
transition, and she
Yeah.
generally supports them, but she's kind of like,
What would that be like? Yeah.
yeah. And it is true. And they say, what is it to be a woman? It boils down to, again, like some of the arguments I've had of, can you like sci-fi? Can you like science if you're a woman? Of course you can.
Mm.
But some women feel like they can't, or they keep it quiet. It's their little secret nerdy passion.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I do think you can drive yourself proper mad getting a little bit too introspective on that at times.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I always say to people is, if my body can be, let's be honest, a 50-50 split. When you look at my body, that part's definitely male, that part's definitely female. There's very little fuzzy bits with me,
Mm-hmm.
If my body can be like this, why can't someone's mind?
Mm.
Why can't someone's soul, for lack of a better term, being? Because I suppose, whether you're going to use intersex to back up or discredit transism, the one thing you can say is, by us existing, we kind of show the idea of sex as a binary isn't really a good idea.
Mm.
And by that extension, then, why should gender be a binary?
Mm. Yeah.
And maybe we're all intersex in our own ways, our
Yeah. Who
own
knows, right?
individual in our own ways,
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
There are levels to it. I mean, that we might never know about,
mhm.
because it's not like we all understand the human body completely, like 100%.
Oh,
You know.
when it comes to this human body, no one understands it, trust me. I've had too many doctors scratching their heads and walk away. And that's without the intersex stuff. That's just with everything else.
Yeah.
It's when they've got an x-ray of your leg and they hold it upside down and put it in the mirror and just try to find a way to make it make sense to them.
Yeah. That must be reassuring.
Oh, it's funny. I'm so used to it. But I mean, it is funny when they haven't read my records.
Mm.
And so I was having an ultrasound the other day. And I think this is one of those self-censoring moments where I feel awkward saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I feel awkward saying it, I'm worried people will feel awkward hearing it.
Mm.
So if you're squeamish, skip ahead 2 minutes.
Go on.
So I was having an ultrasound on my scrotum, which is normally empty, because of a hernia.
Mm-hmm.
And women can get hernias as well as men, for the people waiting for a got ya. And only that was on display. Everything else was covered. And the sonographer went, "Can you turn your penis to the left, please?" I went, "No." And she went, "Why not?" "Because for the same reason you couldn't." And she looked at me, looked at my notes, lifted up the bit of tissue to see. She went, "Okay, we'll work around that. That's fine." Absolute pro.
Yeah.
It's like she would know. I would love to have someone like her on stage with me, because she'd be the person where, if the props all fell apart, if the set fell down, she would still make it work.
Right.
It's like, so not at all flustered at that. She just went,
Yeah.
she could tell that
Okay.
I wasn't bothered by it, so she wasn't going to be bothered by it. She wasn't going to make it all awkward by being bothered by it. She just went, "Well, that's fine. We'll have to find a way of working around that."
Already.
Absolute pro. And I had
Brilliant.
so much respect for her for that. That was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, there are some medical issues about being intersex, far more about having spina bifida and a few other genetic quirks.
Mm.
But again, the whole special case. Most people with spina bifida don't walk as well as me, but I'm special.
Yep.
So you may have heard the condition multiple sclerosis. And that's where the protective coating of your nervous system is damaged. If your nerves are wire, myelin is the insulation around the wire. Well, I have 3 times more myelin than a normal human.
That's interesting.
Pure luck. Absolute pure luck. So I've got this gap in my spine, and it causes me very few problems. It's got nothing to do with strength of character. It's got nothing to do with willpower or trying harder than other people. It's sheer bloody luck.
Wow.
And I always make a point of explaining that to people because I would hate for them to go away and think that other people in wheelchairs aren't trying hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
That would
Mm-hmm.
be horrible.
Yeah.
And so I always say, I'm really lucky. This thing happened. It's a genetic quirk. We don't know why.
Mm.
I'm grateful for it. But you can't expect other people with spina bifida to be able to get into a fight with a Shaolin monk. I'm probably the only person with spina bifida who's ever done that.
Oh my
I
goodness.
lost badly. So very badly.
Well, yeah.
I walked away with less teeth than I went in there with, but
Ooh,
it was still
ouch.
fun to say I've done.
Fair, yeah. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, it's again, I mean, I suppose I always think everyone's life, when you get down to it, is special and unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I do think I come away with a lot more special points than most people. But again, it's through biology and circumstances, nothing to do with me.
Mm.
It's nothing to do with my sense of character or my sense of will. It's just luck.
I love that.
There's always going to be an outlier. And it just so happens I'm an outlier on about 25 different graphs.
Wow. Amazing.
So
I love how you say it's just luck. That is just beautiful. I love that.
It would be, as I said, I mean, it could be fun to say, yeah, I'm just stronger willed than the rest of you. I've just got more willpower. And that's how I can put one foot in front of the other when everyone else is spine bifida can't. But it would be a hideous thing to do. To make people who ultimately don't know any better think that someone in a wheelchair could walk if they just put their mind to it. It would be horrible. But yeah, so I always make a point of saying it's luck. And I always make a point of saying that I can be as outgoing, as fun as I am because I come home to an amazing woman who will hug me and make me feel better on the days when I don't feel great. And amazing friends that will take me for a coffee and take me shopping if I do feel rubbish. And I mean, they'll all be listening to this, so I've got to say nice things about them.
But having support is so important.
It is.
Yeah.
And sometimes in their support, they will do things like, let's explore your femininity for a while, shall we? Yeah. And so they will actually encourage me to try something new in case I'm missing out on it.
Yeah.
And then other times, I'm just one of the people with them, and we happen to all look like girls at the time. So last week, I was helping a friend move house. And I just done human library, so I was wearing a very nice dress. But it was the first time most of them had seen me in that style of dress. And again, the thing that freaked everyone out wasn't the cleavage. It was how skinny my arms had gotten over the last few years.
Right.
Because they remember me as being this big hench guy. They're like, you're thinner than the half of us. Your shoulders are thinner than half of us. Your arms are thinner than half of us. Like, you're in the light lifting, pal. Those two have to go and do the heavy lifting. And again, that was weird for me to suddenly see that this is how the one thing that I identified as in my life, what if not male, if not female, was hench as hell. And now I wasn't. But again, that's the sort of thing which I self-censor, because when I talk about it, somebody goes, that sounds like it's some sort of subdom thing or whatever. And I was like, no, it's just my arms have melted and I find it weird. And I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, apart from that, I know, and my friends, they do talk about it with me, and they do say, well, no, it doesn't change who you are on the inside. And ultimately, with your bad back, you shouldn't be lifting stuff anyway, so what are you worried about? They're very pragmatic people, my friends. And I'm very lucky for them.
Amazing.
And but no, they're so with such wonderful support. They said, an amazing wife, absolutely amazing friends, great parents grown up, what I needed as a disabled kid. I really can't complain about my life at all. And I wouldn't change a damn thing about it.
I love that.
Why would I give up a chance to see and do and feel everything just to fit someone else's perception of normality, which is based on one culture of this planet's idea of normality at that.
Mm.
Nah, I'm going to carry on doing this. Thank you very much. It's great.
That's wonderful. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing.
No, you're welcome.
That was
Thank
a
you for
beautiful
talking.
conversation.
I hope I
Yeah.
didn't ramble on too much there.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
It-
No,
it-
like I said, we could talk for ages.
I can. I always have to tell people, please interrupt me. I will go off on a rant otherwise. And the other thing, I suppose if I'm like any fictional character, I'm a lot like Bender from Futurama with the
Yeah.
alcohol. Does he get more drunk if he's sober or not? Because in some episodes they've had him not drinking, and it makes him act drunk and vice versa. I'm the same with things like my pain medication. They can't work out how it works for me if I had too much or if I had too little. So that can
Yeah.
lead to a lot of rambling as well. Of if I take my painkillers or don't take my painkillers, I can still go on a very surreal rant at some point. And again, that's nothing to do with intersex. That's just having a hole in your spine.
Yeah.
But it's been great fun. And I hope it's helped someone.
Yeah. Well, I am sure it will. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what it's about. Thank you.
Yep. You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Zelda, where you can also read the transcript. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com, on social media, and on YouTube. Again, if you'd like to support us, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender or buy us a coffee. Links are on the website. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded. Good. That is running. That looks to be running all right. If you say something for me, I'll have a look at your audio wave.
Hello there, this is Zelda, world authority on most science fictions, Star Wars, and other lifestyle choices.
Excellent. Hydration.
Very important.
Yes.